Looking at the rules for proper Bible interpretation, and it consists of a lot of reading. Read the entire Bible, because you have to put any passage within the context of the entirety of the Bible. Read the individual book under consideration, and then asking questions: who's the author? To whom is it written? Of whom it was written? Those are different things. It might be written about somebody else, but it's written to this other person. The design or the purpose of the book, why is it being written? The historical setting of the book. And of course, where was the author when he wrote the book? All of those are important. Some include this. I don't, in what I've got, to read the individual book in multiple translations. As far as good translations, there, King James, American Standard, New King James, to a lesser extent, the English Standard Bible, ESV, to a lesser extent, I would say, even the New American Standard Bible. But then there's a lot of others. They can be profitable, but sometimes you see more interpretive paraphrasing than you do actual translation, and so you have to be careful. By the way, you can see that with King James, in fact. But it is good sometimes to read it in various translations. You can get maybe an understanding that you didn't have. Make an outline of the book. Not very easy to do if you make a detailed outline, but outline the book. Then read the section of the book that you're dealing with, and read the chapter. And read the verse or the verses under consideration. And as you read that, consider the context, because any passage taken out of its context becomes a pretext. Do not interpret any difficult passage of Scripture to where it contradicts an easy passage of Scripture. There are no contradictions in the Bible, so work it out to where it harmonizes. If my interpretation of a passage contradicts another passage that is, especially if it's an easier passage to understand, my interpretation's wrong. I've got to go back and I've got to study some more, and I've got to get the right interpretation. Consider the grammar. And we mentioned especially from the Greek text, and thus that Tim didn't call it a cheat sheet this time, past Sunday, but that sheet that has all of the Greek verbs in it. Consider all of that. Then we were talking about figurative language. There's a lot of figurative language. And we have gone through parables, it's figurative language, a fable, then we have allegories, and we gave illustrations of each of these, then metonymy.
What?
Metonymy.
Oh, yeah, okay, I know.
And I think I divided the metonymy up in the various metonymy of cause, metonymy of effect, metonymy of the subject, metonymy of the adjunct or or relation. So, metonymy. And that's where we got to last time. The next one on your list that I gave you is synecdoche. A synecdoche is where you put a part for the whole or a whole for the part. Can go either way. Generally, it's being used to draw attention to something of greater significance than the part, or to narrow the focus to something specific. Now then, the difference between metonymy and synecdoche is in metonymy, the exchange is made between two related nouns, while in synecdoche, the exchange is made between two associated ideas. So you have nouns as opposed to ideas. I'll make a couple of examples now. Acts 24 and verse 5. This is the Jews' accusation against Paul, that we have found this man a pestilent fellow and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Throughout the world. Was it really throughout the world? No, that's too broad of a term, but it's being used to draw attention to what he's done. Thus, it is a synecdoche. In Romans 1 and verse 8, it talks about, first, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. Was it literally throughout the whole world? Probably not. That their faith was spoken of throughout the whole world. In Acts 19 and verse 27, this is the accusation by the coppersmith, Alexander the coppersmith, so that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, and this is against Paul again, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worshipeth. Did everyone in Asia and everyone throughout the whole world worship Diana, the goddess of the Ephesians? No.
The majority did, though. The very big.
Not throughout the whole world.
Yeah, they trying to argue from you're a minority.
It's a synecdoche, taking a whole for a part. That's all that it is. The whole world, well, it's a part of the world. I don't know how many times elders have had someone come to them and say, everybody says, Paul, has that ever happened to you? He's laughing. It happened. He said, generally it's one person. That's generally the case, or one family. Yet it's everybody in the congregation. No, it's not. Are they lying? Well, they're using a synecdoche. That this is disturbing us,
Sounds like
or me.
exaggerations.
There's some over there. It is exaggeration to an extent, but it's also a synecdoche, taking the whole for a part. The next one is an apostrophe. An apostrophe is that little thing in grammar before you get to the S, right, or right after an S in a word. Well, in grammar that may be true, but an apostrophe, you want one of everything? Dale's been given most of those. He wasn't here last week, so he didn't get the one from last week, but he's gotten all the rest, I believe. An apostrophe. We might call it an interlude. It's kind of what it deals with. It's a turning away from the real auditor whom he is addressing and speaks to an imaginary one. In other words, if I'm speaking to you, but then I talk about, Joe Blow over here, he's this and that. That's an apostrophe. Because I turned away from you and I'm talking to Joe Blow then, an imaginary one. It's also the breaking off of a speech or in the course of a speech and diverting it to some new person or thing. In James, the 4th chapter, and he's been addressing the poor, or he's addressing the poor, but then in verses 1 through 6, he changes and addresses the rich oppressors. And then returns to a subject when we get down to verse 7. Submit yourselves, therefore, unto God. So this is an apostrophe in James's discussion. 1 Corinthians 13. How many are familiar with 1 Corinthians 13? It's a chapter on what? Love. It's a big apostrophe. Okay, that's not his subject. His subject starts in chapter 12. And it's dealing with miraculous powers or miraculous spiritual gifts, miraculous powers. He's coming down in that discussion of miraculous powers, and he gets to verse 31, and he says, "Yet show I unto you a more excellent way." He then has this apostrophe, chapter 13, of the more excellent way. After he discusses that more excellent way, which is the way of love, in chapter 14 he goes right back to his discussion, miraculous powers. So the entirety of that great chapter on love, in reality, is an apostrophe. Preachers do it all the time. On a side note or some other comment, and they'll talk about something and then come back to their subject. And sometimes we jokingly say this is for free because it's not part of the subject that you're talking about. but you make a side note, a side comment, and then come back to your subject. That's an apostrophe. An aside, yeah. An interlude, a side note. So that's my aside now. The next is a proverb. A proverb is a short, pithy sentence, or a couple of sentences, containing a complete and valuable thought. They are ruling principles for guiding life. They're not always absolute. But they're a principle. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, what? He will not depart from it. Do they ever depart from it?
No.
So if they do, then that's not a universal law, is it?
No.
But it's still a proverb because it is a general principle of valuable thought, a ruling principle for the guiding of life. So an example of this, well, read the book of Proverbs and you got it. It's hard to, omit that part of it. But there's a couple of others in the Bible. For example, Ezra 18 and verse 2. I said Ezra. Ezekiel 18 and verse 2. When it says, "What mean ye that ye use this proverb concerning the land of Israel, saying, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge"? He identifies it as a proverb. This is a proverb that you use. One in the New Testament would be Luke the 4th chapter and verse 23, where Jesus says, he says unto them, "Ye will surely say unto me this proverb, Physician, heal thyself. Whatsoever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also in thy country." But the proverb there is, "Physician, heal thyself." Bill?
Would there be one when Herod Anubis kind of gave us some dry humor toward him and sent him back to Thailand? Would that be one? Luke 23, 6 through 12, 8 through 12, somewhere in there.
I can't.
Get the how it goes exactly, but I've read it so many times. Read it? Okay, I will. I apologize.
I don't really know offhand.
That was really inconsiderate. I apologize, people. Should always return to it.
That's an apostrophe at this point. So
You don't want to read it?
not at this time.
Okay,
No,
I apologize.
we'll just keep going. And
Proverbs Peter usually dog return to his father.
okay, that would be a proverb. In Proverbs, 2 Peter 2 and that one's verse 22, I think, 21. So there's a lot of proverbs in the scriptures that are not specifically identified as proverbs. Just a short saying that is a general truth. Personification. That is a figure where things are represented or spoken of as persons. Bullinger said in finding this figure is employed when the absent are spoken of or to as present, when the dead are spoken of as alive, or when anything, that is a country, is expressed as a person. So he identifies a little bit more than what in English we would identify as personification. That first part, a figure or a thing that is represented as a person, is what we generally think of as personification. A couple of illustrations. Numbers, the 16th chapter. If you're not familiar with that chapter, it's the rebellion of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And at the beginning, On is included, but he's dropped from the scene for some reason. On, or On, O-N. But he is dropped from the scene as you go through. But if you come down to verse 31 and 32, this rebellion is met with, and it came to pass, as he had made an end of speaking all these words, that the ground clave asunder that was under them, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses and all the men that appertained to Korah and all their goods. The earth has a mouth? The earth can swallow? Well, not literally. It's using personification, the figure of a person opening its mouth and swallowing. And that's the figure that he uses, a personification there, to express what the earth did in relationship to Korah and those who were with. Isaiah 55 and verse 12 is another one. It says, "For ye shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace, and the mountains and the hills shall break forth unto you into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands."
Would the chain reference for that be technically the trees didn't do well? Everything's gonna dance one day, at the end of time, will burn up, melt and everything.
I don't think that's personification there.
That wouldn't be a chain reference for that?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay, I apologize.
Because this is mountains and hills breaking forth into singing. The trees of the field clapping their hands out of joy. It says, "For ye shall go out with joy." Well, do the mountains and hills literally sing? If you go,
That's kind of describing the wind blowing.
you could at times you think that, but it's personification. It's using the figure of a person singing for joy. Yeah, the hills are alive with music, and from the sound of music, same type of personification. And the trees clapping their hands. I've seen, I guess, some twigs that maybe look like hands, but I've never seen hands on a tree, except maybe in some, science fiction movies and such, but you can hear the sound of the wind going through, but they're not literally clapping their hands. It's personification, using the figure of a person in relationship to these trees and the hills and mountains. Turn over to Proverbs, the 8th chapter. wanted to bring this one up and maybe deal with it a little bit more extensively. I haven't had any of these since I moved here that come to their house and they're Jehovah's Witnesses. They claim they were actually Russellites in following Charles Taze Russell. And they believe that Jesus is a created being. Yes, they do.
I know they do.
Okay, then that's what I said. That's what they believe. We're not arguing with them right now. One of their arguments, though, comes from Proverbs, the 8th chapter. If you look down, verse 24, for example. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. There was no fountains abounding with water. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills was I brought forth. And they argue that this is talking or a reference about the second person of the Godhead, Jesus the Christ, and that he had a beginning. When was it? When God created him before he created the world. And they think that they've used that many of times. Go back to verse 1. Doth not wisdom cry? Does wisdom literally cry? What's he doing? He's using personification in relationship to wisdom. And understanding put forth her voice. Again, personification is there. She who? Wisdom. Understanding. She standeth in the top of high places by the way, in the paths, or places of the paths. Personification again is being used. She being used for wisdom and understanding. Verse 3, she crieth at the gates, at the entry of the city, at the coming in of at the doors. Unto you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of men. Again, her voice. Wisdom's voice. Personification. O ye simple, understand wisdom, and ye fools, be of an understanding heart. Hear, for I will speak of excellent things, and the opening of my lips shall be right things, for my mouth shall speak truth. My mouth, whose mouth? Wisdom's. Understanding. And wickedness is an abomination to my lips. And so they'll use this to try and reference Christ. All of the words of my mouth are in righteousness. There is nothing froward or perverse in them. They are all plain to him that understandeth, and right to them that findeth knowledge. Receive my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. Again, he identifies that he's talking about wisdom. Verse 12, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge of witty inventions. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogancy, and the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. God hates that? Yes, but he's talking about wisdom. By me kings reign. Don't kings reign by God's power? Well, yes. But here he's talking about wisdom. And princes decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles, even all the judges of the earth. I love them that love me, and those that seek me early shall find me. Riches and honor are with me, yea, durable riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. I lead in the way of righteousness in the midst of the paths of judgment, that I may cause those that love me to inherit substance, and I will fill their treasures. What's he talking about? Wisdom. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. In other words, wisdom came before the establishment of the world. Not talking about Christ, even though that's the way in which they apply it. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there was no fountains, abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills was I brought forth. Wisdom was, not Christ. While as yet he had not made the earth, nor the fields, nor the highest part of the dust of the world. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass on the face of the depth, when he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep, when he gave to the sea his decree that the waters should not pass his commandment, when he appointed the foundations of the earth, then I was by him, as one brought up with him, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. Rejoice in the habitable part of his earth, and my delights were with the sons of men. Now therefore hearken unto me, O my children, for blessed are they that keep my ways. By the way, is he talking about God's ways here? He's talking about wisdom's ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and refuse it not. Blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates. Can there be an application to obedience to God and hearing God's word? Well, there might be, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about wisdom. For whoso findeth me findeth life, and shall obtain favor of the Lord. But he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul, and they that hate me love death. Wisdom hath builded. He's still talking about wisdom, even going into chapter 9. The whole discussion is about wisdom. Now, and those Russellites that come to the door, they have been taught their pat scriptures that they think that they can prove that Jesus was a created being. He was not. He was eternal. And this is one of those passages that they will invariably use. Proverbs, the 8th chapter. But the whole chapter is a personification of wisdom. Told one that before, and he had absolutely no concept what personification meant, what it was dealing with. So understand and that again goes back to study the context. You go to verse 1 of chapter 8, verse 1 of chapter 9, get a good picture as to what he's talking about, wisdom and understanding. So that's personification. The next one, prolepsis. It literally means to take before. It is anticipating what is going to be done and speak of future things as present. And in saying that, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you start seeing some illustrations of it.
You're fixing to give us one of
Well, I would be a poor teacher if I didn't.
I spell sarcasm.
So,
That's a little further down.
yeah, sarcasm's a little bit farther down. We hadn't gotten to that yet, so please cut that out. Genesis 2 and verse 20. Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. In Genesis 2:20, when Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living, was she the mother of anyone at that point in time? No. She wasn't the mother of anyone. And yet, he calls her the mother of all living. Why? Because it's something that she will become. Every person can trace their ancestry back to Adam and Eve. Well, no, we can't really, but if we're actually trying to trace it, but we know that every person who lives on this earth has come as a result of Adam and Eve. So she is the mother of all living. But it is spoken of as in the present when it hadn't even happened yet. Doesn't happen till later on. Genesis 12 and verse 8. Says, and this is about Abraham, or Abram at the time, that he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Hai on the east, and there he built an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. The east of Bethel, right? Wait a minute, Bethel didn't exist then. Bethel did not receive that name until Genesis 28th chapter, and specifically verses 10 through verse 19. Remember what took place then?
Yeah, they had that dream, I think.
There was a dream of a ladder going up into heaven, and he named it the place Bethel. That's where it receives a name, but yet in Genesis 12 it's being called Bethel. Why? Well, it's the use of prolepsis.
Is that an example of God's chronology from Moses 10 before it actually later got named Bethel?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's just a matter of recording history, and from the historical standpoint, yes, it didn't receive it until here, but I'm writing it over here, and I know that it's going to be called Bethel, so even though it's over here, back over here in time, I'll use the term Bethel that people will be familiar with.
And that's an implication of the Scripture's inspiration. Tons of examples of that all through the Bible.
Well, that specifically is not.
That's not?
No,
I
but
guess I'm being, I apologize.
no, because the person, in this case Moses, writing it after the fact, it's already been named Bethel. He knows it. Everybody else knows where Bethel is. And so he's calling it by the name Bethel, even though it had not at that point received that name.
Publicly speaking, in other words.
It had not received it, period. It doesn't receive it.
He's writing in year 4 about year 2,
Okay.
something that happened in year 3.
Right. That would be a good illustration. So that's prolepsis. Luke the 3rd chapter, verse 19 and 20. But Herod the Tetrarch being reproved by him for Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, and for all the evils which Herod had done, added yet this above all, that he shut up John in prison. As far as timeline is concerned, Herod did not shut up John in prison till after the events of Luke, the 3rd chapter. But it's being written before it happened, not from the standpoint of a prophecy as much as prolepsis. And I would say that some have claimed that these things are prophecies. They're not really prophecies, because the person who's writing them, they're writing history. They're just using prolepsis in the writing of their history. Hebrews 2 and verse 8, and we'll stop with this. Thou hast put all things in subjection under his feet. For in that he hath put all in subjection under him, he left nothing that is not put under him. But now we see not yet all things put under him. Now then notice, all things in subjection under his, talking about Christ's feet. But then at the end he says, but now we see not all things are put under him. He's using prolepsis, all things are going to be put under him, but at this point in time, not everything had been. So it's a prolepsis, looking at something, putting it in the standpoint of the future, when at the present it has not yet taken place. So any questions about that? And since Andrew's about to ring that second bell, we'll stop there, and Lord willing, next week pick up with irony.